Okay, we are 80A. So about 15, 18 lines down, we're up to Amar of Yehuda. So we mentioned this idea of a koi, which before we thought it was a breed of a deer and a goat. However, now we're going to have varying opinions. Amar of Yehuda, koi beria b'fnei atzmahi. It's its own creature. And they were undecided. They didn't no conclusion if it's a wild animal or it's a domesticated animal. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. It'll make a difference for covering the blood. It'll make a difference. The forbidden fats are only by a domesticated animal, not by a forbidden animal. Covering the bloods by a wild animal, not by a domesticated animal. So it depends. Rav Nachman Amar Koi Zeh Ayil Habar. So he says a koil is a wild ram. Grows up in the forest.
Part deer, part sea. Part deer and part sea. What's sea?
No,
you got that far.
Not that far. Let's see a second. It's some kind of a ram that grows up in the. Yeah, here. It's a wild ram. Okay, a wild ram. Lives in the forest. A wild ram. So these opinions are actually reflecting the opinions of the Amara of the Tanaim. It says Kitanai Koiza Ayal Abar. One opinion says this koi is a wild ram and lives in the forest. Another opinion says that, which we had yesterday, was that it's it comes from a goat and a tzivya, a deer, female deer, I think we said. Rabbi Yossi Omer koi beri b'fnei atzmahi v'lo. He says no, it's its own creature, and we're not sure what it is. Is it a domesticated animal or a wild animal? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer min behema. It is a domesticated animal. The shell base dushai hayu megadlim and adarim, and the house of dushai would raise them flocks and flocks of these animals. So 4 different opinions exactly what the nature of this koi is. Okay. Now Amar of Zera, Amar of Zafra, Amar of Hamnuna, Hani Easy Debalok, Sheros Lagabe Mizbeach. So now you have these goats of the forest. Is that how they translate it?
Many herds.
Yeah, the next line.
Forest goats.
Forest goats, okay. Aze de Bala, yeah, okay. So the word Bala means a forest. So it's a forest goat. So these are Sheros Legabe Mizbeach, meaning even though it's in the forest, you would think it's a wild animal and therefore you cannot bring it as a sacrifice. But we're saying no, they might be in the forest, but they're still considered domesticated, and therefore you can bring them on the altar. Savarla, Ki Hadam Rav Yitzchak, this is like the opinion of Rav Yitzchak. Eser behemos manar kasu. So there's 10 animals that the Torah lists. Coming up in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So it says Eser behemos manar kasu. The Sulo. It says there's 10 animals that the Torah lists, and that's it. And v'hani, these forest goats, midloka chashav lahu b'hadei chayos shma mina de'ezlinhu. Since they weren't listed with the wild animals that were listed in the verse, must be that it's a domesticated animal. And since it's a domesticated animal, it can be brought up on the altar. Maskef Rav Acha bar Yaakov has a question though. Ve'ema ayel v'tzi prat. The verse lists the ram and the deer. Those are specifics. Then it says kol behema. The next verse says the kol behema, and any domesticated animal. So that's a format of a klal uprat tu klal. You have animal. You list specific animals, and then you say, and the animals. So that's a klalu prat to klal. So what happens? And nasa klal, most of all prat, the animals that were listed, when it has the general word of behema afterwards, so that comes to tell you, that it's we're adding on more animals. So ika tuva. So therefore, you can't bring a proof that the fact that it wasn't listed, it's not a wild animal. Maybe really when it says the kol behema, the general wordage of all animals, it included this forest goat as well, and therefore it would be a wild animal. That the Gemara says, Im Kain, if that's true, then Kol Hani Prati Lamali. So then why did the Torah go through listing all the different animals, all 10? You could just list one or two and then have the animal in the beginning and animal in the end, and it'll include all animals that are similar to it. The fact that it listed 10 animals shows you it was these 10 are going to be the wild animals. And the fact that this forest goat is not mentioned as one of them shows that it's a domesticated animal and not a wild animal. Now, Maskiv Ravacha Breder Ravika Vidilma Mina De'ako Ninhu. So he says, don't tell me that this forest goat is a domesticated animal because it's not listed as one of the wild animals in the Torah. However, maybe it's a Mina De'ako Ninhu. Actually, he doesn't know exactly what this is. Mina De'ako. It's some kind of Mina De'ako is some. There's no translation on how they translate it. It says, yeah, the Akko. It's the goats of the Akko species. So Akko is listed in the Torah. So maybe these forest goats are part of those forest goats. Now, that's one question. Amarle Rav Acha, Breder Rav Rashi, Amarle Rav Acha, Breder Rav Aviva Rashi, Dilmamina de Toe, Omina de Zemerninu. These are other animals that are listed. The toe animals, the toe goats.
Species of Zemer, also listed among coyotes.
Right, so maybe it's one of those species. How do you conclude so conclusively that since it's not listed as a domesticated animal, maybe it's included in one of those other species? Rav Nachman, Chanan, Rav Ashi, Ameimar Shari Tarbayu. So Rav Chanan said to Rav Ashi that our Meimar allowed the fats of this animal. The fact that he allowed the fats of the animal means it's a wild animal and not a domesticated animal because forbidden fats are only on domesticated animals and not on wild animals. So these goats of the bala of the forest goats, what are they? Can I bring them on the altar? So Amarlead Kanlo Pligi Rabbi Yossi Rabbanan Ela B'Shor Habar. Shor Habor. The Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis only argue about an ox, a wild ox, a forest ox. The Tanan Shor Habor min behemahu. The Mishnah says that this Shor Habor, not to be confused with the kosher meat company, is a min behemahu, is a type of, what is that? That's right. So the is a domestic animal. Rabbi Yossi Amar min chaya. He says no, it's a wild animal. So they only argue about that, but they don't. That's about the forest ox, the forest goat. They don't argue about. Now, why do they argue about that? What's their argument? Rabbanan savri mid turbala. Since we in the Aramaic, the Targum English translates this sharabor as a turbala, as an ox. So that's mina de behemahu. That shows you that it's domesticated. It's a kind of a domestic animal. Rabbi Yossi Savar, okay, but where is it listed? That animal is listed amongst the wild animals. So really it's a wild animal. So its translation indicates it's domesticated. Its listing is that it's part of the wild animals. So that's their debate. But that's all by the ox. Aval honey, but by the forest goat, divrei akol mina de ezninu. He says everyone agrees it's going to be considered a goat, and therefore it's going to be domesticated, and therefore you could bring it up on the altar. Once again, maybe it's from the species of the goats from Akko species. So same as before, maybe it's part of the other toe o zemer species. Okay, but Ameimar allowed its fat to be eaten, which shows you that really it's a wild animal and not a domesticated animal, because a domesticated animal, its fat is forbidden. So it sounds like there is different ways to go, but it sounds like because Ameimar allowed the fats to be eaten, that's more conclusive. That's really considered a wild animals. Next time you find yourself a forest goat, figure out what to do. Yeah. Okay. Now, our Mishnah listed all the different permutations of this prohibition of slaughtering the animal and its kid. Now, one of them was, let's see. So, Amr of Oshia, Kulam Asnisin Dlo Reb Shimon. Our entire Mishnah is not like Reb Shimon. Now, it's interesting. Our Mishnah is pretty specific about or that you can't shecht the animal and its kid. Now Reb Shimon's going to hold that any shchita that's not considered a shchita, meaning you can't eat the meat, is not halachli a shchita. Even though you did the act of shchita, but halachli doesn't register as a shchita. It registers just as killing the animal. So if you have a sacrificial animal and you slaughter it, but for whatever reason, let's say you slaughter it outside the temple, so that meat is no longer able to be consumed. Even though you did an act of shchita, you cut through whatever two pipes you have to cut through, but it's Rabbi Shimon holds doesn't register as a halachic shchita. It's the same as shooting it dead. So there's no prohibition of not to shoot two animals dead in one day. There's a prohibition of shechting the animal and its kid. Yeah. So on that we're gonna have now. We're gonna see. So, how do I know? It says you have two sacrificial animals. Let's say the mother and the child, the father and the child, and you go and they're both sanctified, and now you bring it outside the temple, all the way outside the temple. So what happens? Tani kachim b'chutz. So our Mishnah said, if you take these two animals and you slaughter them outside the temple, so the first one, chayiv kares, because you did a shchita skot, you slaughtered outside the temple. That's bad. Now, the shneim psulin, both of them are invalid because the first animal is invalid because you can't, and now it's slaughtered outside. The second one's also invalid because you slaughtered it outside. It's also invalid because it's an animal that's parent was slaughtered, so you can't slaughter that animal. And the shneim stovkim es harbaim, and they both get lashes. They both get lashes. So now, let's see, why does that fly in the face of Reb Shimon? Michti shma'ina like the Reb Shimon. We heard that Reb Shimon holds, and it'll take us for a while. The Amar shchita she'ena re'uya lo shmei shchita. Reb Shimon holds that a shchita that's not a proper shchita, meaning the shchita doesn't result in the ability to eat the meat or to bring it up on the altar, is lo shmei shchita, is not considered a shchita. Next page. So therefore, the first animal that you slaughtered outside the temple, so that's a sacrificial animal that's slaughtered outside the temple, that can never be brought up on the altar. So that's not considered a shchita. That's considered a killing. It's like you shot it dead. So kama, the first animal, miktal katle. So 1 second. So if the first animal you just shot dead, or a kin, that's what he holds is by a shchita that's not fit to be a shchita. The second animal, there's no prohibition of slaughtering it and its kid. Because you didn't slaughter the first one. You never slaughtered it and its kid. You shot the first one. Yeah. We would never be able to think of this, right? So yeah. Yeah, what's the difference? So kama mikta katle. Let's do more research, yeah. Kama mikta katle. So sheni is miskabel. So the second animal, is an animal that is fit to be brought inside the altar. Sheni is miskabel b'fnimu, because if you hold like our Mishnah, so then the second animal is never fit to be brought inside the altar because its parent was slaughtered. There's a prohibition on slaughtering it. So it's not fit to be brought inside. Therefore, there's no kares on that animal. But according to Reb Shimon, that the first animal wasn't considered a slaughtering, so then the second animal, you could have brought it inside and slaughtered it. So that second animal that's slaughtered outside should also be kares. Sheni miskabel b'fnimu, and therefore kares nami l'chayev. So we see from there the fact that our Mishnah says on the second animal you're not liable for kares shows you that we don't hold like Reb Shimon, because we hold the first animal was considered a slaughtering, even though it's invalid. It's still considered a halakhic slaughtering, and therefore the second animal cannot be brought inside the temple because its parent was slaughtered already, and therefore you can't slaughter a kid and the parent on the same day. So therefore, since it was never fit to be brought inside the altar, when you slaughter it outside, there will be no kares punishment. That's our Mishnah. According to Rabbi Shimon, there should be kares for the second animal. So that's one. Another area we see not like Rabbi Shimon, Chulin bifnim. So you have two animals that are mundane, and you take them inside the temple to slaughter them. So now, Chulin bifnim, shneim, our Mishnah says, shneim psulin, they're both invalid because you slaughtered a mundane inside. And the sheni, the second one, so big as arba, and the second one you get lashes because you slaughtered it and then its kid on the same day. Yeah. Do you retroactively get punished for slaughtering the first animal? I'm just curious.
It doesn't sound
Right. Just the kid, just for the kid. I mean, the problem is slaughtering a kid on the same day as his parents slaughtered, or the problem is slaughtering like a full package, two of them in one day. Probably just the kid. Okay. More research. And then there's no prohibition? Oh, there's still prohibition. Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because it's his.
In one day, it doesn't say which order. That's interesting. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, but the cars is for both of them at the end of the day, not for one of them, right? Because each one individually is fine. It's like a package deal. Okay. So either way, so our Mishnah says that the second one is slaughtered inside, you get lashes. Fine. Now, Michti, let's see. He says that a shchita is not fit. That's not proper, meaning that's not going to result in offering on the temple. Eating it is lo shmei shchita. So if that's true, so then kama mikta katli, the first mundane animal that you slaughtered inside, so that's like you're killing it because that you're not going to be able to eat the food. You invalidated it, or you're not able to bring up on the altar. So the first one, you just killed it. So then Shani, the second one, why do you get lashes? Why do you get 40 lashes? The first one was never slaughtered; it was just killed. Oh, so another place you see, not like Reb Shimon. Okay, now Kachim Bifnim, a third case, two mundane animals slaughtered inside. So Kachim Bifnim, the first one is good to go. Sounds like it. Kachim Bifnim, Harishon Kasher. Upater, first one you go. You did nothing wrong. Took the animal, slaughtered it inside the temple. It's sanctified. Perfect. Upater, you get exempt and nothing wrong. Now you take a second animal and you bring it inside and you slaughter it. Hashani Sobek Esarbayim. You get lashes. Upasel, and it's invalid. Hold on. According to Rav Shimon Michti, Shmin Rav Shimon Damar Shchita and Aruya Lo Shmei Shchita. Oh, so now this is interesting. According to Rav Shimon, the first animal you slaughtered. So why does that not considered a slaughtering? What were you missing? So here it's interesting, and I think they're gonna argue about this. They're gonna bring it up later. That according to Reb Shimon, you shechted it, but right now, until you actually apply the blood on the altar, you can't access the meat. The blood on the altar is the matir; it's the permitter that allows you to go put the meat on the altar and then consume it. So until you haven't done that yet. So therefore, that shchita is not considered shchita. It's like waiting in limbo. Interesting. Shchita generally lo shmei shchita, and therefore, shchita's kachim, even the slaughtering of a sacrificial animal, nami shchita she'ena ru'uhi. Why? Dekama de lo zarik dam lo mishteri basar. Until you have not applied the blood, the meat is not fit. So before you apply the blood, you slaughter the second animal, but it comes out now that you never applied the blood. So it comes out that really that first shchita is not considered a shchita. It's a very interesting concept. According to Reb Shimon, that means every time you slaughter an animal in the base of Mikdash, so it's waiting in limbo for the shchita to be considered a good shchita until the blood is applied, which is a very interesting idea. So, go for it. Yeah. So now, if that's true, the first one ends up you slaughter the kid before you apply the blood. So it comes out that the first one was never considered a slaughtering. which means that the second one didn't have a prohibition of it and its kid. So then the question is, am I Sylvic Arbine? Upassal. Why is it you get 40 lashes? You did nothing wrong. Not nothing wrong, but the second animal is not under the prohibition. So why do you get lashes for it? And why is it invalid? Oh, Ela Shmamina. You see from here, our Mishnah below Krib Shimon. So now the Gemara says, well, yeah, obviously it's not like Krib Shimon. Like, why'd you just spend the last, half a page speaking this out? That's Pshita. Pshita the Haki. Pshita the Haki. That's obvious that it's like our Mishnah is definitely not like Krib Shimon. It doesn't take a Gemara to figure that out. You can figure that out on your own. So we say no. Isa Shchitas, Pshita the Haki Isa. It is obvious. Shchitas Kachim, it's Shrichale. The slaughtering of Kachim, there was a novelty there. It's Shrichale. That we needed to teach you, that's also not like Reb Shimon. Why would you have thought that it would be like Reb Shimon? The slaughtering of a sacrificial animal is a Shchita Re'uyihi. At the end of the day, you would have thought, like we would have all concluded, you would have thought it's a fine Shchita. You would have thought, like we would have thought 2 seconds ago, is that of course it's a good shechita. What do you mean? If you'd have just poked the animal in the back and killed it, you would never be able to access the meat. When you shechted it properly, all you have to do is apply the blood, and then you can bring up the meat on the altar and then eat the other part of the meat. So you would have thought that that's considered a shechita. That is a proper shechita, and therefore you would think that that part of the Mishnah would agree with Reb Shimon. Kamashmon, that until you've offered the blood up and then slaughtered the second animal, it comes out that the first animal wasn't a proper shechita, and therefore the second animal should not get lashes. So for that last case, we have to teach this novelty that even that case of slaughtering sacrificial animals is still considered a shechita. That's not proper. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, okay. Fine. So that is that. Now, this that we just mentioned from our Mishnah, that you have 2 sacrificial animals that are brought inside the temple. One is slaughtered, according to our Mishnah, totally fine. The second one, you get lashes for violating the prohibition of the slaughtering a parent and its kid on the same day. Now, and for that you get lashes. But the question is, there should be lashes for something else. An animal that's not fit, the second animal is not the proper time to be brought up on the altar because its parent was shechted that day. So it's called mechusar zman. It's literally means it's lacking time, meaning you're preempting its slaughter, because you could bring it tomorrow because that's not the same day, but you're slaughtering it today. Today it's not fit to be brought on the altar. So what you're doing is you're slaughtering something which it's not in the right time. So you should get malchus for that too. So why did our Mishnah say you only get malchus for the prohibition of parent and child? There should be another prohibition. At the end of the day, once you slaughter the parent, now the child becomes an animal which it's not the proper time to be brought on the altar, and then you went and slaughtered it. So you got 2 things wrong. First of all, you slaughter the kid the same day as its parent. That's one violation. That our Mishnah does say you get lashes. But you also slaughtered an animal for the altar, which is not fit to be brought on the altar. That should be another violation. You should also get lashes for that. And yet our Mishnah doesn't mention it. So the question is, why not? Velil kanami. You should get lashes, mishum, lav de mechusar zman, because of the prohibition of mechusar zman. The Tanya, as the Mishnah says, as the Brisa says, sorry, minayin lechol hapsulin shebeshor v'shebeseh shehu below yeratzeh. How do I know that all the invalidations of an ox or a sheep, thank you, sheep or goat, yeah, that if you do slaughter them, that you violated the prohibition of lo yeratzeh. This is not appeasing. This is not wanted in the Beit Hamikdash. Negative violation, as it says, Talmud Omer, b'shor v'sesaru v'kalut, and then the end of the verse says lo yeratzeh, and this is not wanted. So one of the limud al psulin shebeshor v'shebeseh shub lo yeratzeh. So we see from here that things that are blemishes, things that are improper to be slaughtered, if you bring it up, there's a violation called lo yeratzeh. This is not appeased. This is not wanted in the temple. So why did the Mishnah not mention that? This is one of the disqualifications. a mechusher zman, an animal that's a right. We'll see in a second, but there's animals to a bris milah, but an animal, some animals have to go through 8 days before you can bring them up. So it has to go through 8 days. So what if you go and you slaughter that on the 5th day, on the 4th day? You have to wait till the 8th day to slaughter it up. So that's also it's the wrong time. So says the Gemara that Kika Chashiv, our Mishnah, it's not when it omitted something, it's not because it fundamentally disagrees with this idea that you get lashes. No, it agrees. It's just a technicality in the Mishnah. Kika Chashiv, Lave de Osa has been out. Lave nuchroi lo kachashiv. Our Mishnah is focusing on the prohibitions of the parent and the child. So that prohibition it listed, but it's not coming to list to every possible prohibition you're ever going to violate in this situation. It only listed the ones that we're talking about. We're focused on the animal and its kid. We're not focused on every disqualification under the sun. So therefore, the reason why it omitted it is not because it disagrees with it. It agrees. It's just, it was only mentioning the ones of it and its kid. Says Mar, really? You put one of the cases was slaughtering an animal outside the temple. And there you told me you get kares. So clearly you are talking about other prohibitions that aren't just it and its kid. So and you mentioned it, the Katani Kachim Chutz Arishon Chayiv Kares. V'shneim Sov K'nes Harabayim. You mentioned it that if you slaughter an animal outside the right area, you get kares, you get lashes. So clearly you are mentioning other prohibitions, not just it and its kid. So then once you mention those, why not mention this one? So Bishlama Sheni Mishum Lav Dosov as Beno. So says I understand the second animal, you get lashes because the Osov as Beno. That I understand. But why does the Mishnah say even the first animal that was slaughtered outside the temple, why do you get lashes for that? You're already getting kares. Why do you get lashes also? Ella Rishon Amayis Lav Mishum Lav Deshchutei Chutz. Is it obvious? Is it not because you're getting lashes for violating, slaughtering outside the temple? So you see, you are mentioning that punishment. So says the Gemara. Okay, one sec. Let's make an order in the Mishnah. Kol heicha deleka lav the osav as beno chashiv lave nuchrai. Anytime our Mishnah lists, anytime that there is not a violation of it and its kid, so then it mentioned other violations. The kol heicha the ika lav the osav as beno lo chashiv lave nuchrai. So the Mishnah is saying like this. The Mishnah is saying that whenever kol heicha the leika lav the osav as beno, so chashiv lav nuchrai, whenever there is no prohibition of it and its kid, so then we do mention other prohibitions. Whenever there is a prohibition of it and its kid, so then we do not mention other prohibitions. 1 second. How does that work? Oh, good. Oh, very good. Oh, very good. Exactly. Very good. Very good. Very good. So when you slaughter the parent outside the temple, that's a violation of shkutei chutz. So that's a violation of shkutei. But the second case is a case where it's it and its kid. So when you mentioned the violation of it and its kid, so then you didn't mention you didn't mention a foreign prohibition, such as that it's preempting the right time. When you does not have the prohibition of it and its kid, such as the parent, then you did mention a foreign. So once again, we asked, why don't you get malchus for slaughtering an animal, the kid, which it's the wrong time, because when you slaughtered it the same day as its parent was slaughtered, so therefore it's the wrong time to bring the animal. There's another violation called mechusas man, that you're preempting, you're slaughtering an animal in the wrong time. To that, the Gemara said, we didn't mention foreign prohibitions. That the Gemara says, yes, you did. If you slaughter two animals that are holy outside the temple, the first one gets lashes and gets kares for being slaughtered outside the temple. So you obviously did mention foreign prohibitions. Says the Gemara, no. That animal, just like Steve said, that animal has no prohibition of it and its kid. It's only the father. When you slaughter that first animal, the only prohibition is and you slaughtered it outside the temple. So therefore, but the second animal, the kid, so there the prohibition is that you violated the prohibition of slaughtering the kid and the parent in the same day. So there, we only listed that prohibition. We're not listing foreign prohibitions, such as slaughtering an animal in the wrong time. So really, we fundamentally agree at the end of the day that there is this other prohibition, and you will get lashes for it. However, when we listed the kid being slaughtered, we only focused on the prohibition of it and its parents, and not other prohibitions. Okay. Now that's the first answer, but Rabbi Zera disagrees. Rabbi Zera Amar Hanach L'Mchuzazman, the Kasav Naskula say next page. He says, no, really, your whole assumption was wrong. There is no lashes for the violation of slaughtering an animal in the wrong time. Why? Because he learns that there is a positive rectification of the commandment, right? So we have what's a classic case? We have a case of you have to you can't leave food over, then you have to burn it. No, sorry. You steal an object and then you have to return it. So when you have a rectification to a negative prohibition, so it sounds like it's a little bit less strict. It's called alav, a negative prohibition, hanitak la'aseh, which is connected to a positive prohibition. So this case also, Rabbi Zera learns, there's a negative prohibition of slaughtering in the wrong time, but there is a positive mitzvah, rectification associated with it. Where do we see that? My time, Damar Kra, Miyom Hashmini V'Hala Yeratzeh. The 8th day and onwards, it says it will be appeased. So leave it for 8 days. So Miyom Hashmini in Mikaralo. So from the 8th day onward, you can bring it up as a sacrifice. So what do you see from there? Miyom Hashmini in Mikaralo. After 8 days, you could bring it. Before 8 days, you can't. So what's that called? That's alav haba mechlal aseh. This is a negative prohibition, which is learned out of a positive commandment. So you have the commandment is leave it for after 8 days, you shall slaughter it. The implication being before 8 days, you shall not slaughter it. But it's not written in the negative, it's written in the positive. Negative commandment that's implied from an explicit positive commandment is less stringent, and therefore it has a status of a positive commandment, of a positive prohibition, which does not get lashes. Yeah. It's like a little funny. It's not the classic case of a rectification. Usually the rectification is after you did something wrong, there's rectification. After you left it overnight, you should go burn it. After you stole, you should return. After you for example, okay, but this is still considered something which is less stringent, and it has a therefore you would not get lashes. It's a lav haba mechal aseh, and therefore it's an aseh. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So so now the Gemara says, 1 second. This miyom hashmini v'hala, this from the 8th and onward, that's not available for this exposition because we need it for something else. V'hami baile lechid Rabbi Apotriki. We need it for the exposition of Rabbi Apotriki. Rabbi Apotriki in Ramiksiv, he has he throws two verses against each other. He has a contradiction. Ramiksiv, the animal should be 7 days under its mother. 7 days. But what happens the night after the 7th day? Sounds like it's good. Halai lachazi. That's good. But then another verse says, from the 8th day onward, it's good. 1 second. So is it 7 days and the following night it's good? Or is it after 8 days and then it's good? What's it the night? The 8th, the night. The 8th night. Not the 8th day, but the 8th night. So in a Laila lo. It's not a contradiction. So what's the answer? The answer is Laila likidusha, Yom lehartza. At nighttime, you could sanctify it. Once it's already that 8th night, after 7 days of fast, you can sanctify it, and there's no prohibition of sanctifying something in its improper time. However, when you want to shecht it, that's only the next day. So Yom lehartza. But on the 8th day, you could sacrifice it and bring it as an offering. So we see that this Yom HaShmini V'Hala is needed to in this contradiction. So it's not available to teach us that there's no lashes by sacrificing an animal before its proper time. So it says the Gemara, Yom Lehartza. So Ksiv Krachrin is another pasuk. Kain Tasa L'Shorcha and Litzoncha. It says in the middle of Shmos, it says you should do similar to your ox and your flock. 7 days it should be with his mother, and then on the 8th day, titnuli, then you can give it to me. So there's another verse that says that 7 days it should be with the mother, and then the 8th day you can give it to me, implying that before that is not a proper time. It's not a proper time to sacrifice the animal. It has to only go through 8 days, and then it'll be good. So once again, 2 opinions if slaughtering an animal before the right time is lashes or not. The first opinion said it is lashes, and the technical reason why Mishnah didn't mention it, Rabbi Dovid says no, it's actually a less stringent prohibition. It's really inferred from a positive commandment of give it to me on the 8th day, and therefore there's not going to be lashes. You have to know what the first opinion does with this with this reasoning. This reasoning seems to be very compelling, that it's really a negative prohibition that was learned out of a positive mitzvah, and therefore there shouldn't be any negative prohibition. But the first opinion did not hold of that. Yeah. Time is it? Okay, maybe we'll stop here. Good. Good to be back.